One of the most iconic figures of the Tiananmen massacre is that of the tank man, the solitary figure with shopping bags in hand who stood in front of the advancing line of tanks. That act of brave defiance inspired the world and reminds us why the heroic protest movement of 1989 must never be forgotten. Tiananmen is not simply a past event to study and ponder, but a present reminder that when the Chinese people are free to assemble, to act, and to speak, they demand freedom, democracy, and political reform. What happened on Tiananmen Square in 1989 should also remind us that the principles of freedom and democracy are not only American principles. The fundamental human yearning for dignity and liberty is not limited to any one region or country in the world. They are aspirations that transcend countries and culture, and neither tanks nor torture can erase them. We must take all steps to stop the Chinese Communist government's efforts to export their authoritarian model around the world, which they are aggressively doing. We must find more efficient ways to stop American companies from subsidizing tyranny and forced labor. We must better protect Chinese students and the Chinese diaspora from transnational repression. We must treat the Great Firewall of China like the 21st century Berlin Wall. Tearing it down must be a critical U.S. priority, allowing the dissemination of news and information within China and allowing the Chinese people to communicate freely and securely. At the same time, we must also stand resolutely with those in China and Hong Kong who are imprisoned and disappeared, those persecuted and silenced, those censored and suppressed, the Chinese pastor, the Uyghur, the labor organizer, the Tibetan Buddhist monk, the human rights lawyer, the Hong Kong democracy activist, and countless others living under the repressive policies of the Chinese Communist government. We must communicate to the Chinese people that their struggle and pain has not been and will not be forgotten, and that we believe that the Chinese Communist Party will eventually be consigned to the ash heap of history. To do anything less dishonors the spirit of Tiananmen and those who stood so bravely and resolutely for freedom.
So what has happened in China under the circumstances of the past 35 years has not been positive in terms of global democracy, in terms of human rights, in terms of promoting democratic freedoms. We as Americans, if we do not speak out in recognizing the violations of human rights and democratic freedoms in China because of commercial interest, we lose all moral authority to speak out about human rights in any country in the world. This is a challenge to our conscience as a country. The man before the tank was a symbol of such great courage, not only his, but of all the others in Tiananmen Square, and of yours for speaking out now, student leaders and leaders of human rights and democracy in China for speaking out now. I just wanted to, as the writer Lu Xun wrote, lies written in ink cannot disguise facts written in blood.
If a regime can use tanks in broad daylight to kill its own people and still enjoy the support of the most democratic countries in the world, there's no limit to what it could do, both in terms of internal repression and external aggression. That's why we are seeing the China today. Domestically, CCP chose to erase the memories of the massacre through censorship and brutal repression. It tightened its grip on free speech, banning any mention of the reality of what happened on Tiananmen Square and in the rest of the country, to the extent that many young people today had never heard about it. United States government have deliberately put their heads in the sand, ignoring the cause of human rights activists and political prisoners in China. This strategy may have brought short-term gains in form of increased profit and lower inflation, but appeasing CCP for the benefit of trade has proven to be self-defeating and self-destructive. What Tiananmen told us 35 years ago till today. The most important lesson is that United States policy towards CCP regime must focus on the democratization of China. Without democratization, the regime will become even stronger threat toward universal values, including freedom and human rights. Today, we remember Tiananmen because it reminds us of what a different China could have been, because Chinese people demonstrated their love for freedom and democracy through their protests and resistance.
I think Tiananmen was not just about the past. Tiananmen is ongoing. The repression, the political suppression is ongoing. The mothers are still not allowed to openly mourn their children. And the exiles are not allowed to go home to their parents' sickbed and funerals. And scholars like me are constantly being punished. We are in freedom, we are outside China now, but we are never free. It pains me to watch those younger people just now before me. They testify about the repression, about the fear, about the harassment to their family members, because that's exactly what we've been through. If there's any one thing that keep me going, it's not about courage that people often describe me. It's because of the fear. It's because of the fear that we had lived through, especially after 1989. And it's because of the fear that I wanted to continue. I wanted to carry on. The past 35 years was a war of memory against forgetting. The CCP has used all the state machinery to erase the history and memory. William Quintana said it all. The struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. And in 1984, we knew that those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control our future. Let's work together collectively to make sure that government in Beijing cannot control our present and control our past and control our future. I know that we may lose many battles, but we are going to win the war of justice and truth. History is going to be on our side.